How you all doing? So I was watching backstage, and that's been some really intense content. I'm kind of shitting myself about how intelligent all those people were. If I could just get you, anyone who's going to stay, if I could just get you to stand up. Just because you're sat in this dark room, you're not going to enjoy this bit, but it's fun. And just roll your arms, just get a quick stretch, that's it. A bit of a yawn, get it out the way, roll the shoulders. Maybe hug the person next to you, whatever takes your fancy, and then take a seat. That's nothing to do with my content, by the way. That's just trying to break the ice. So by way of introduction, my name's Dom Price. If you've got any questions, you want to tweet or contact me, I'm at Dom Price on Twitter and Dominic Price on LinkedIn. I don't work for a startup, I work for a scale-up. I've had the fortune of spending the last 6 years at Atlassian in Sydney. I am originally from Manchester and have worked in London as well, but I've spent the last 15 years loving life on the other side of the world, literally the exact opposite side of the world. And in those 6 years at Atlassian, we've gone from about 500 people, we're now nearly 4,000 people globally, from around 30,000 customers to over 140,000 customers, from privately listed, we're now publicly listed on the NASDAQ with a valuation over $30 billion US. But it still feels quite scrappy and like a startup, except we're doing that at scale. So some of the stories I'm going to share with you today are about that. The first thing I want to share with you is nothing to do with startups, it's nothing to do with remote work, kind of nothing to do with the future of work. But it's one of the reasons I joined Atlassian, and it's one of the reasons I love Atlassian. And it's our values. And I encourage any of you who is either starting your own organization or in one right now to codify the values of what you stand for. Because for us, this is what we hire for, it's what we recognize for, and how we actually grow our teams. We do not hire for culture fit, because we don't want like-minded people. We hire for values fit. Values like don't fuck the customer are different to customer first or customer centricity, and say put the customer front and center of absolutely every decision that you make. Things like play as a team, things like be the change you seek, because we are all co-owners of the organization. How do we drive that change? So one reason that these are important for me is there used to be two versions of me. There was work Dom and social Dom, and then over time I started to hang out with workmates, and it's quite confusing, and then I realized it'd be much easier if there was just one version of me. And my values as a human are very similar to Atlassian's values, and it's amazing how much tax that takes away from me. The second reason values are important. In a previous life, I was a consultant at Deloitte. I'm actually a chartered accountant by trade. And in my time there, I was asked by a CEO to do a piece of consulting for an organization where the CEO said, our problem is we have a terrible culture. In fact, he later confessed that it wasn't the culture that was the problem, they just had bad people. And so he did what all good CEOs would do. He went to an offsite, to a vineyard, with his top 30 executives to land on the new values for the organization. And after a 4-hour brainstorm, and I'm still at the back of the room, they landed on pride, respect, integrity, collaboration, and knowledge. Do any of you work in organizations with that? I apologize in advance if any of you work there. So I'm officially a 41-year-old man, but in reality, I'm a child. And what I did was the similar noise that lady just made, because what happened was I suddenly realized something, and I did that snigger where it comes out of your nose, not out of your mouth. And the CEO said, all right, smart ass, what's so funny? And I was like, it spells prick. And I've got this vision of the end of year prick awards, the mouse mat's not going to be good, the whole thing's wrong. And it's kind of funny, but it's also true how organizations create these values but don't understand what they're actually living for. And for you, whether you're in an established business, a scaling business, it's just you by yourself, you've got to know not only what are the values you stand for, but what are the behaviors you're willing to walk past, the things that you're willing to allow to happen. So when we focus on remote work, there's 3 things that I want to talk to you about today. One is the tools, the second one is the place, the actual physical nature of remote work, and the last one is practices, ways of working. But before we do that, I want to zoom back quickly to why remote work is even a topic. Throughout my entire career, telecommuting or remote working has been talked about, and yet we're still trying to actually fulfill that realization of working in a distributed fashion. And when I think about the trends in Industry 4.0, the things that I'm seeing, not just in my business, But in a huge amount of organizations that I get to work with, there are some common themes. The fact that there's a war for talent. I've yet to meet anyone that's hiring the B or the C players. Everyone's only hiring A players. The fact that we're in distributed teams all over the world, even if your people that you work with aren't distributed, often your customers, clients, suppliers will be. The fact that we're more reliant on partnerships. The fact that these wonderful devices mean we can work 24/7, but that doesn't mean we should work 24/7. And then the fact that our customers expect more and more from you every single day. We release software products, and even for the same price, each month, each year, they expect that product to improve, and they don't want to pay any more for it. So let's start with tools. The obvious thing, I work for a technology company. We build tools, and we think tools are important. But actually, before you even think about tooling, there's the basics. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right, when we think about remote work and distributed teams, these basics might seem obvious, but if you don't get them right, they actually prevent you from being an effective remote worker. They prevent you from engaging properly with your teams. One of the most common mistakes we find when people think about remote work is like, oh, you mean work from home occasionally? That's great because I can just kind of roll the duvet back, get my laptop, and I can just work from bed. And it's like, no, for us, remote work is having a physical office space. It's just not the same physical office space that I'm in. And having that discipline of good internet connectivity, having good audio, video capability, and having that office where you can separate your work life from your personal life is often quite important. But even when you get that right, remote work isn't easy. It's not always natural. There's many human habits that we've developed from being co-located with our teammates. One of the things that we've used to sort of combat that is chat. Now this is Slack. Slack is one of our tools, but Slack is a way for our teams that are distributed and remote to communicate effectively, to have that instantaneous conversation. Again, quite obvious in today's world, but your discipline of how you use that becomes quite important. Another product that we use extensively across Atlassian, and we've seen other organizations do the same, is Trello. Here we're actually using Trello for onboarding. So when we hire a new starter, we share the Trello board with them before they start, so they're fully aware of their experience they're going to have when they join the organization. And this is great because over half of our Trello team are remote. But we want them all to have a similar experience. It means we can put visuals in place, and we can guide them through their experience over the first 30, 60, and 90 days of joining the organization. The next one we use extensively is Confluent to collaborate. Now this is important because there's a whole load of accidental conversations that occur when you're co-located. When you're making lunch together or you're hanging out at the water cooler and you make that decision or you have that contextual discussion that the remote person never heard. One of the disciplines we've been building is how do we document options and decisions. In this example, this is a tool we use called the DAISY, who's the driver, approver, consulted, and informed. How do we make those discussions and decisions a first-class citizen so everyone has the same context? And then even for us more recently, that gnarly sort of more complex challenges of design. How do we co-design when we're not physically stood at the same whiteboard or the same premises or tooling? And we often do that. This is an example of Envision being used integrated in Jira. Again, context, so wherever you are in the world, we all have the same version of the same truth. It's amazing how much time that saves. Next one, if the text had worked there, would be place. Does anyone recognize a challenge with this image? Apart from the fact that this would be the most good-looking conference call I've ever been on in my entire life. How nice does he look in that gray jumper? He's just dreamy. Now, as well as this stock image showing some very attractive people, and the fact that most of the people dialing in are not connected in any way to a video or device, the challenge with this is the inequity. Just by a show of hands, have any of you been the person on the conference call or video conference when everyone else is in a meeting room, and within about 5 minutes you're completely forgotten about? And then you try and butt in and like, oh, sorry, completely forgot you were there. Or when they dial off, and you're like, I'm still here. We actually had that experience with our remote workers. The problem was the remote workers were the minority, so we never heard from them. It's amazing how silence creates ignorance. You're like, that was a really good meeting. Bob didn't say much though, did he? I think he's disengaged. And you're like, no, Bob was just ignored for the entire meeting. And so even here, we're trying to find a way of leveling the playing field. So we went for fully remote meetings. The rule set we put in place was if one person dials in, we all dial in. So empathy is a wonderful piece of technology. Empathy is a wonderful piece of human technology. But let's just remove empathy. The fact that 3 of us were co-located in the same office, we would all still dial in. We're all looking at the same screen. We're all on a level playing field. It completely changed the way we engage, communicate, and listen to others. So there's simple hacks that can find a way of making you engage better with your team. There's then that whole kind of social side of work that you miss when you're a remote worker. And so again, with our Trello team, we learned, because over half of them are remote, ways of actually bringing that humane part of work into the work life here, taking those accidental things and making them real. In this example, we gave all of our staff an afternoon off as a treat for doing some great work and delivering some projects. But what we said to them was, on the Trello board, can you please document what you did, how you enjoyed it, what experience you had? Not humble brags, just sharing what you did. And we called it Vitamin D Appreciation Day. Okay, so a whole lot of people just went out and did their own thing and shared those stories. Again, those conversations you'd have by accident around the office when you find out about someone's real life, their family, their traditions, their habits, their rituals. And it just gives you that different level of connective tissue. And then because I work a lot with software developers, they're like nothing more than using technology to gamify a situation. This is a game they call Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers is the most basic form of algorithm that basically joins people together in the organization, puts them in a shared space, and says, you are now going to have a conversation. You might not know each other, you might know each other really well, but it basically just kind of rolls the dice and connects people. They then have a conversation and they share that conversation back. Again, just finding ways of connecting human to human that we often forget about when that person is out of sight. Just because they're out of sight, please do not make them out of mind. And then the last thing is kind of the easiest and also the hardest, which is practices, the way we work human to human. And the reason it's the hardest is those practices are often very close to us. If you're in a co-located team, you often don't need to define your practices because it's just the way you work. You don't even have a name for it often. What we found is when we have remote team members as part of a team, the co-located team dominates. They will have a stand-up, but you're physically not there, so how do you join in? What we found with practices is we make how we work a first-class citizen. We have documented all of our internal ways of working. We have over 400 teams across the globe working in software development, design, product management, marketing, legal, HR, all types of disciplines. And we've documented the way our teams work, and we've shared that externally. So every one of you here gets access to this free of charge. We've basically open sourced our ways of working as we've scaled the organization. And it's comprised of 2 components. One is a health monitor. It's a way we assess how we work as a team. It says that every team member is equal, and we do a thumb up, thumb sideways, and thumb down exercise to rate how we're working as a team. And then to complement that, we've documented plays, which are exercises to build our team muscle, how we work better together. And now we've got over 45 plays in our playbook. So if any of you are working in a team and you're not sure how effective that team is, use this for free. This is our IP of how hundreds of teams work across the globe, and so you can assess how your team works. When we ran this with our teams, the #1 area our teams struggled with was shared understanding. Shared understanding says you know why you're doing what you are doing. Our team's like, oh no, we know what we're doing. We've got a backlog, we've got a task list, we've got a to-do. We know what we're doing, but we've forgotten why. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you are busy, but you are probably not effective. And so what we actually did was we found ways of then building that muscle. This is an example of how we prioritize as a team. When we first kick off a project, we have a discussion as a group. What are our priorities? What are our trade-offs? How do we explicitly agree these rather than making assumptions which send us on very divergent paths of how we work? So whether it be any facet of the future of work around distributed teams, remote teams, the war for talent, the desire to be more innovative, the fact that we can always be on but we shouldn't always be on, whatever the future holds, the good news is the answer to that future is in the room. So when I talk about the future of work, a lot of people say to me, how do we get there? And the answer is you. You role model the behaviors, the actions, the rituals, the habits, the ways of working that make it all right for everyone else to do the same thing. My mentor told me last year, she said to me, Are you a role model? And I kind of ummed and ahed. Can you just, by show of hands, put your hand up if you think you're a role model? So if everyone could just put their hand up, that would be a lot easier. Because you're all a role model. The thing is, no one comes and tells you, which is kind of cool, because it'd be awkward if they did. If I walked up to you and go, hello, I'm role modeling you right now. I like your behaviors. You would be quite right to call the police or HR. The thing is, every single one of you here in this room is a role model for future ways of working. You just don't realize or know the 70 to 100 people that are role modeling your behaviors. So whatever business you're in, if you want to build a better future of how we work together, both with partners within your organization, with suppliers, with customers, you have to role model that, because you are the secret and the potential to unleashing your organization, however big or small you are. If you have any questions, I'm doing a Q&A at 3:30 on the Q&A stage, or you can ping me at @DonPrice on LinkedIn or Twitter, and thank you very much for your time.